The second defection in weeks for Labour from the Conservatives, and Natalie Elphicke's defection, as some of the comments which have been made on my site suggests that Labour supporters are not happy with her joining them, and they talk about a tactical defection to preserve her 12,000 seat majority, her 12,000 vote majority, and they also talk about the unfairness to the Labour Party candidate who's been selected to vie for her seat, Mike Tapp. What's going to happen to him? And she hasn't said anything about whether or not she's going to whether or not she's going to stand for the seat of Dover and Deal. But presumably, if she's defected with such a flurry of newspaper headlines, something must have been said by the Labour leadership. And what I find so extraordinary is surely it's the local party that chooses the candidate, and the Labour High Command simply accepts the democratic decision of the local group. Maybe that doesn't apply in this case. In the case of Poulter, he was very clear. He was falling on his sword, and this was simply a statement of his opinion of the Conservative Party. Natalie Elphicke is far from clear, and more than that, she's been in the past very shrill about some of her beliefs in defiance of Labour Party members. So I cannot imagine that they would be voting for her with enthusiasm simply to spite who? To spite, well, the Conservative Party presumably will drop in some other candidate. But again, it makes very, very little sense. And at the moment, we've got in the last 12 days, as Keir Starmer pointed out, 2,400 people have arrived on small boats in the last 12 days. So demonstrating once again that the Rwanda policy is not something that is a deterrent, added to which they're now going to join what again Keir Starmer calls the perma backlog. That's such a good definition, and whoever came up with that needs a serious tick and a pat on the back, as also the idea of a Tory amnesty for migrants. This is again an attempt to get away from the idea that the Labour Party is indulging asylum seekers or migrants, and is operating a policy, as the Prime Minister suggests, of open borders. Instead, the Labour Party needs to set out an idea how it can reform the idea of the concept of migration in the 21st century. That means, though Labour is saying it wants to talk to the EU, it really needs to have a much more global conversation. Either Labour has that conversation or the Conservatives have that conversation before Rishi Sunak's end of office. But one or other of them has to host that conference, or that conference will be hosted by somebody else. I think here is an opportunity to seize the initiative and to set the terms of a new migration policy for the 21st century, because it is only going to get a bigger issue. And I find it extraordinary that no politician in Westminster has yet raised this idea that this is something that needs to be discussed globally. And by globally, I think this needs to include those nations with whom the Western Europe is not fully happy. And I think those nations will equally participate because it affects everybody. It affects everybody. We have to find a way to distinguish between worthy and less worthy migrants. It's like distinguishing between the worthy and the unworthy poor. It's very patronizing, and we have to find a way through that. And I don't think it's about distinguishing between economic migrants and migrants who are fleeing persecution. I think there are better standards for. We simply need a new standard of definition, and we need a new approach, and that requires academics to start looking at this issue in an original way. And if they can't do it before the next election, then they need to do it very shortly afterwards, because this is a problem which will dog Labour and an incoming administration in a way that it has barely scraped the surface with the present Conservative government. If Ukraine were to fall, the number of refugees coming across Europe to Britain and to other countries in Europe will be phenomenal. Because Putin has demonstrated very clearly that he does not tolerate dissent, and he doesn't tolerate anyone who questions his authority, and the Ukrainians have clearly questioned his authority. There will be there will be many people fleeing his wrath. Now, if Ukraine succeeds, equally, there may well be an outpouring of refugees from Russia, because I cannot imagine Putin and the Putin faction will remain silent over a nation that acquiesces. So one way or another, we are expecting, I think, a large number of refugees from Eastern Europe, and we need to be prepared for that.